The greatest gunslinger in the West. Whoever is, they're not me. But I have a real shot at being the worst shot. When I first ventured into the Red Dead series, I did it without using guns. Now that I can finally fill the air with gun smoke, I might as well strive to make every shot count. When I first began this challenge, it was with the goal of not missing, but I quickly recognized it wasn't very hard if I kept using Deadeye to help me out. So I began again this time, without allowing Deadeye, which slows down time. The challenge still didn't feel difficult enough until I realized the game has an expert firing mode, where my aim is completely my fault. That simple fix turns this into a proper Red Dead challenge. Whenever I miss, I need to immediately restart from the last checkpoint or the last save. In order to play it safe, I'll be using the game's stat menu to keep track of my shots, though the game's not always smart about it, as you'll soon see. With a spoiler warning, let's keep a cool head, a steady arm, and strive to beat all of Red Dead Redemption 1 without missing. As notorious reformed outlaw John Marston, I take full advantage of finally being able to use guns in this game and break the reformed part of my title. So, starting again, I pay a visit to Bill, the former friend I'm hunting, only for him to prove that his men are pretty good at not missing. Saved by a kind stranger, we bond by racing horses, though I admit I might have tried to ensure my win here with a less than friendly option. Thwarted, I take to town and in less than 5 minutes of being there, get challenged to a duel to the death. What is it about me that always makes people so violent? Duels force Deadeye, but being this challenge is more about not missing than anything else, it's the one area I allow Deadeye. Dueling feels too essential to the theme of the challenge to outright ignore, after all. Winning my first fight, I joined with the sheriff and his deputies to go clean up the county. It's here where I meet the very first roadblock to the challenge, and that's the game's lack of a restart from checkpoint option. If there is one, I could never find it anyway. So this means I either flee from the area, abandoning my confused companions, or I get myself killed, whether by a hail of gunfire or chucking myself off the nearest ledge. This is probably much more confusing and scarring to my allies, but those are timelines I no longer need to worry about. A true boon to the challenge is the existence of rifles. Pistols may be iconic, but rifles have the range I need to ensure my bullets stay straight and don't go flying off to hit some innocent rock. When I join Nigel West Dickens, a con man, into selling fake miracle tonics, he forces me to shoot objects to prove the potions work. Hitting the objects isn't difficult, except for this hat throw, but thankfully all these skeptics are very sympathetic and just let me keep trying until I pull it off. Thing is, the game doesn't count any shot that doesn't hit a living creature, meaning, despite landing these 3 shots, all are considered misses to the game. There's no getting around these tutorial shots, but at least we know I didn't actually miss, despite what the game says. Same goes for when I join a posse to hunt down a bunch of Bill's bandits terrorizing local farms. For whatever reason, even as I landed bullet after bullet, my accuracy stat was falling. After a few resets, I realized it was dropping even when I hadn't opened fire yet. Turns out in this one skirmish, my allies' missed shots were counting as mine. We can't have that. I could simply knife everyone, but I also made against the rules to use any melee attacks, as that defeats the idea of the challenge. So instead I switched to my knife so that the game wouldn't count against me. Then after waiting a moment and switching back, I found the stats would no longer count my allies, making it simple from there to wipe out the outlaws. While heading out of town to claim a bounty, I'm surprised to find myself being challenged by the same man I dueled earlier, Tobias Weldon. It seems he miraculously survived the many bullet wounds I left him with, so I did him a favor, granting him a few more. An hour later, as I left the gunsmith, I'm shocked yet again to see Tobias, who once again challenges me to a duel to the death. I'm starting to think, to the death isn't that big of a deal to this angry man who is either an immortal or happens to have identical brothers with similar fashion sense and parents who lacked creativity in naming their children. So far, the challenge hasn't been much trouble, but when I go to help the crazed treasure hunter Seth out, that's when everything changes. All the combat as of yet has been on foot, and when it hasn't, I found that racing onwards and tanking through the bullets to be quite effective. My no guns challenge proved to me that's an option here, when Seth and I are continuously assaulted by other treasure hunters, but it's incredibly difficult to pull off, as it's more based on luck than skill. So I strive to knock the horsemen out of the chase with well-timed shots. But unfortunately, well-timed is not a quality that my shots normally possess. I go from 30 resets by this point to a little above 100 over the course of an hour and a half. If I slowed to try and line up the shots, the wagon would never make it, except of course if I do miss, in which case the enemies seem to suddenly lose their ability to destroy us now that I need them to. At times, I really feel the universe simply enjoys punching my emotions around. As the sun beat down upon us and bullets whizzed by, I searched desperately for an answer out of this. The solution came in the form of a lucky shot on one of the treasure hunters who was in the middle of lighting a fire bottle, which ended up lighting him and both his companions on fire instead. After that, more luck shone down on me when I found that as long as I aimed at them, even without firing, and simply kept the wagon autopiloting forward, the hunters failed to kill me. This tactic sometimes worked in Red Dead 2, but this is the first time I got it to work here. Blessedly free of that, I'm terrified to find myself back in another wagon chase with Nigel this time. It's not nearly as bad, except for the dynamite blocking our way, where I must shoot it. I do try and get our enemies to fire on it, but they stop shooting at me if I'm behind the wagon, and more than that, they usually end up dead far too fast since Wes Dickens wastes no time in wasting them. Free of those chases, the rest of the chapter goes much smoother as I have no trouble picking off enemies if they're not flying by on horseback. It's not my shining moment though when I murder an old man for his house deed. Try to understand though, I would have normally let him live and simply paid the 200 for it, but checking my money, I find it to be at 666. So of course, with a sign like that, I'm not responsible for my devilish actions, right? It might be karma that a few moments later I get killed 3 times in a row by random events, plus numerous more failures when I take on every single gang hideout in the area. Between those hideout shootouts and a few bounties, I built my legend and my reset counter by quite a bit over an hour and a half. After a tough but short firefight, I collect myself a Gatling gun and make my way to the fort, in which Bill hides. With my team behind me, we breach the fort and this challenge completely unravels. Much like my no guns challenge, there's no getting around using the fast shooting gun, but that doesn't stop me from spending 2.5 hours trying to figure out a solution. This moment in the game is meant to be a powerhouse moment for the player, as you easily mow down the entire fort in moments without breaking a sweat. That's great if I was playing normally or doing a no death challenge, but here I need accuracy over everything, and this gun may be fast and deadly, but it's nowhere near precise. Even if you line up the gun perfectly, it's completely down to luck on whether the shot will land or go wildly off course. Even analyzing the footage at super slow speed for half an hour, I still couldn't see any discernible pattern to the shooting. I thought maybe John's arm position, the distance of the enemies, and the angle of the gun might give an idea of how much the bullets would veer off, but no matter what, there doesn't seem to be a way to predict the shots. Yes, you're not likely to miss if the enemy's a few feet away, but most refuse to come that close, since they're not quite yet that brain dead. So finally, I had to accept that as long as the miss comes from bad luck, and not me firing at the wrong time, I wouldn't reset. This leads to a 64.9% Gatling gun hit percent that drops down to 55.4% when I'm forced into a second sequence a moment later. The total hit percent falls from 99% to 91.7%, heavily wounding both my soul in this challenge. Nothing to do but push on to Mexico to continue my hunt for Bill, who escaped the ambush. The suffering I collected at the fort continues to mount as the river we used to cross into Mexico fills up with bounty hunters. To be fair, most of the suffering on this raft is self-inflicted, as it's actually quite simple to get through 2/3 of the river with barely firing a shot. My need to fire anyway to test my less than stellar abilities is a large part of why I'm waiting around for someone to finish me off, so I can reset. Problem is, they're not very good at killing me until after a new checkpoint, making me load my save and restart the entire mission, further increasing the length I spend in agony here. The other major issue are these dynamite throwers that are just high enough to make my shots not guaranteed before I'm forced to flop around on the raft like an unlucky fish. Spending another hour and a half there certainly wasn't something I saw coming or enjoyed, but at long last, I'm in Mexico for part 2. My joy melts into sorrow as I'm quickly reminded why I hate being here. Wagons, horseback fights, and lots of train protection jobs. I'm a terrible shot. Why did I ever think this challenge was a good idea? Honestly, if my no guns challenge hadn't taught me an exploit to escorting the train safely, I may never have escaped these levels. Even then, it takes me a while to pull it off without getting shot off my horse, missing a shot, or the train exploding. I thought that if you're far from the train becomes immune to damage. But, as it turns out, it's actually if you stay far away from any enemies, the train stops taking hits. I thought leaving Mexico for a little break in town might have been nice. But all I get for my troubles is losing a duel, drowning some more, and then running right back into my old enemy, Tobias. Our first rematch ends with him dead, yet again, but somehow I missed, so I reset. I'm then shocked to lose the follow-up duel. I guess it was only a matter of time before our persistent Tobias took victory, and perhaps it's for the best, since after his win, I never see him again. I think he might have been a ghost with unfinished business, which, unfortunately for me, that business was killing me. The rest of Mexico flies by as I prove if the firefight does not occur on horseback, it's not much trouble, especially when I'm granted the gift that every little rat dreams of, a high-powered sniper. Whether it be killing rebels or the fascist government soldiers, a rifle and a sniper is all you need. This combo makes it simple to chase down and eliminate my old outlaw friend Javier, but it doesn't do me too much good when the government counterattacks. I'm supposed to use this cannon, but oddly enough, if I land the shot dead center on the approaching soldiers, the game still counts it as a miss, so no cannon for me. No need though when the rebels can do it all themselves. Taking the fight to the dictator who is harboring Bill in safety, my hit percentage drops some more when I shoot 3 locks and free some rebel prisoners. Backed with those rebel support though, it doesn't take much to bring down the guards blocking our way, but we're not quite fast enough to stop Bill from fleeing once more. Giving chase, I spend the next 30 minutes mostly blowing myself up in order to reset after I miss crucial shot after shot. I normally am terrible at these chases as we've well established, but throwing in a Gatling gun that covers the majority of a guard really amps up my failure level. When I feel I miss once more, I prepare to reset, but before I do, I check the stats just in case, and it says I hit that last shot. I'm not sure how I did, but I'm trusting the menu, especially since the menu loves to say I miss even when it makes no sense. Going at a slow, patient pace, I don't waste my next 3 shots, bringing down the gunner and the 2 drivers, which brings Bill's escaped attempt to a halt. With one final shot for him, I'm free of Chapter 2 and head up north to track down the last of my former brothers in arms. Joining the agents who are holding my family hostage, I grab a wounded informant working for them and carry him to safety. Well, first deep into the depths of the ocean, but second to safety. Much to my surprise, most of my time spent helping these agents out is fantastically easy for once. Most combat occurs without dreaded horseback. In fact, one mission involves me sniping bank robbers from a roof, which is the best kind of mission possible for me. Maybe not for the hostages I go to rescue, but for me. But still, overall, all my assaults on Dutch, John's former leader, proved to be simple to pull off. That is, until the agents forced me to play gunner for them. If I thought the Gatling gun section was bad for this challenge, I'd seen nothing yet. This Browning machine gun does seem to avoid scattering bullets everywhere by a tad bit, but not by much. Add on to that, the majority of the attackers are much further away, and chucking dynamite at me, that one-shots me. Dynamite has never one-shot me before, but it does here, because the game considers John getting knocked out of the turret as equivalent to being dead. The only thing I have going for me, other than my good looks of course, is the fact that if I can't see them, they can't seem to see me. This means I can heal mostly in safety, though the same doesn't seem to work for my evil drivers. This safety quirk doesn't do me much good though, as the moment I turn around to open fire, I'm blown to smithereens. In the end, as before, I'm forced to accept that every shot simply won't land. But that doesn't mean I can't ensure as many as possible do. If an enemy moves unpredictably, or I'm not aligning my target on their body, that's still a miss and I must reset. Otherwise, away we go, filling the hills with screams, as in my screams of pain, as I watch my accuracy counter drop bit by bit. Gods bless the man who blew us off the side of the road and finally put an end to my agony. Only 32.4% of that machine gun's fire actually landed, with my total accuracy now at 86.4%. I've spent hours and hours meticulously ensuring I take the utmost care to line up every shot, only for 2 short missions of mayhem to riddle this challenge into the grave. But that's okay. It's not about succeeding as much as it is about the hijinks that come from the attempt. Dutch's last stand goes horrendously, but just this once, not for me. The army and I, mostly I, make short work of all his lads, though admittedly, the army may suffer more casualties than expected. When I make it to the final defense wall, only the army captain and I are here, with none of his men along to blow the wall. Good news! That means none of Dutch's men came to kill us in order to keep it fair, but since my only options are now idle conversation with the captain, or death, the choice is obvious. Doesn't have to be my death, though. Arson is the only way to progress, which is always fun, except that it comes at the cost of the game counting the lantern I shoot as a miss. Dutch, cornered at last, tries to escape by aiming for the bushes. So close. Agent Ross doesn't seem to get shots don't count if the target's already dead, but I won't fault him for trying. I will fault him for letting me go home to the easiest missions of the game, where John bonds with his family, but then betraying John and bringing his army down upon us. As befitting the final battle of the game, the fighting is intense, and the soldiers rain hell down upon us. Uncle is a bit of a slouch and just lays there lazily, but it's a hot day, so I don't blame him. Returning fire I always miss sooner or later. It's really sickening how the military is making me blow up my own family, but at least we do it as a family. A family that kills and dies together is a family that stays together, am I right? Guess Jack and Abigail don't agree, as they hightail it out of there, and I'm left behind to take as many of these soldiers with me as I can. They're not family, but I suppose they'll have to do. With John's demise, Jack and Abigail return to the farm to loot the dead, as John would have wanted. Burying John, Jack, his son, time skips forward 3 years into the truly great tragedy of having god-awful hair. This is the dark side of being an orphan that no one warns you about. Thankfully, the only person I expose Jack's ugly to is Agent Ross, the man behind my suffering. If you don't count myself, that is. In his sheer disgust at seeing Jack's style, he promptly dies. Huzz! After 30 hours, 43 minutes with 431 resets, I've beaten most of Red Dead Redemption without missing and without Deadeye. Not so bad for having killed 799 people. Yeah, I'm not making it into heaven. That 87.8% hit percentage would have been 100% if the game counted items that they forced me to shoot as hits. And of course, if those bloody machine gun sections didn't exist. Thank you all for watching. I know I'm a bad shot, but this was ridiculously worse than I expected. I'm off to track down Jack and give him some much needed fashion advice. Who better to give fashion advice than a rat, after all? Good luck, be well, and see you later, friends.